Welcome to the Purpose Focused Advisor. This show is for financial advisors who want to grow their business with clarity, lead with purpose, and build a life that reflects what matters most.
Welcome back. It is my favorite time of the week. It's time for the Purpose Focused Advisor. Rob Brown here, along with my guest, John Kailunas. I practiced.
Great job.
Anyway, I practiced that because I wanted to get it right. I've enjoyed getting to know John just for a few minutes prior to this call, and I know this is going to be an action-filled podcast. John, if you've not met him or heard about him, is the author of Mission Retirement. He's been in the business for 25 years. He still sits with clients, even though his overall business has graced over almost $4 billion in assets under management and assets under advisement. And John does something that I love doing. He helps coach financial advisors on how to be better at what they do. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Rob. It's an honor to be here.
So, John, tell me, you got started at the kitchen table. What was it that helped you to decide, say, hey, I'm going to take this chance to sit down with somebody and talk to them about their money, about their financial plan?
Well, long story short, my dad was an old insurance guy and worked for a career distribution for 42 years. I decided I wanted a different path, and I had bounced in the industry and became an associate general agent with John Hancock, and then determined that really wasn't a good spot for what I wanted to build. So I ventured out on my own, and as of January of this year, it's 25-year anniversary of Regal. So,
yeah, that's awesome.
Been a journey.
Yeah. Gosh, just think about everything that's happened in the last 25 years. It's a lot to go through.
Oh, the market fluctuations, regulations, growth, expansion, the emergence of the RIA channel. I mean, it's quite incredible. I'm starting to be the old man on the mountain, I guess, Rob, because I'm looking back at a lot of things that's happened and how we've maneuvered through all of that to get to where we are today.
Yeah. And all the while, it's been a lot of fun because as we were talking about, as we were getting started, it is a privilege, an honor to be able to serve people in this profession and help them achieve their purpose in their lives by living out our purposes as coaches and advisors. So, John, kind of what's the purpose? What's the big thing that drives you in doing what you do to sitting behind that kitchen table to spending 25 years in the business, to getting to $4 billion in assets, to now writing a book and helping coach other advisors?
My two favorite things in the industry are helping clients, sitting down with them and taking a problem and managing to absolute performance, to making sure that they're going to hit their goals that are important to them. Not what's important to me, what's important to them. And then on the second part, the second part of my career, the first part was about income, trying to make a living and build a business. And now it's about impact. And I look at a lot of these G2, these younger advisors that really need a lot of guidance and help. I mean, you and I had a lot of leaders in the industry that were providing guidance or sales systems or tracks or programs. There just isn't a lot of great stuff out there. And I think that generation really needs some help, and not a helping hand, but a lift up, right? A good firm shake and a lift up to get to where they need to be to serve people. And I think you've got to have a service heart. So serving the client and then serving the broker population.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. But the thing that you said that I want to go back to here for a second is, and this is what you said in talking about the individual investor client, but I would imagine the same is true in part for your advisor clients. It's not helping them build a plan, create a plan, live out a plan that you have for them. It's helping them understand what it is they want, so that you can put them on that path. And I think sometimes as advisors, we miss that.
I think it's listening skills, right? We as advisors come in, we see a dollar amount, we think we know what they want, and we start crafting a plan. And we really need to step back and listen more. Get to know, the first rule when you get securities license is know your client. I think we should spend 70% of our time doing that. And I call that the art of the business. The science is the alpha, beta, standard deviation, and all the great stuff we do, the great cool tech we have, Monte Carlo, all the stuff we can do for people, right? Absolutely important. I think the younger generation focuses more on that than actually getting to know Mr. and Mrs. McGillicuddy and finding out money gives them the liberty to do what they want. But do we really take time to understand what they want? Because a lot of times they'll come in and say, I want to golf. And that's great. That might work for a year, but then you get bored of that. They don't want to live on their children's couch. They want to make sure that they're not going to outspend their money, right? So we put in guarantees and stuff, but we don't really truly know the true essence of what they want. And that's why we wrote the book Mission Retirement.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And I've been noticing that more in some of the things that I'm reading that advisors are talking about. I feel like maybe there's a bit of, and maybe it's because of Mission Retirement and other books similar to that. There's a movement afoot to get into what really matters to people and to be really intentional about it. And it's not just to say, I'm going to play golf in retirement. That gets pretty frustrating. But it's
We've never golfed, but you obviously are talking about my game.
Yeah.
Very frustrating.
Yes. I think sounds like we're talking about each other's games. But what is it you really want, Mr. and Mrs. Client? What is it you're really after? Because maybe you didn't stop to take the time to think about it.
They don't, and they really don't. And there's 10 separate missions in Mission Retirement. You can do one, or you can do all 10. It's a very short book, 125. That's meant for a client read, and it can be customized for the advisor. But the important thing about it is when we were doing our research, Rob, this blew me away. 40% of all seniors end up lonely in retirement. I don't know about you, but I don't want my clients working 40 years and then being lonely. I don't want to be lonely after putting in, you put your blood, sweat, and tears, you raise a family, you do all this stuff, and then your end goal is you got a 40% chance of being lonely. And then when you look further into the research and you see that they spend 9 hours a day sleeping, the average senior, and then 10 hours on leisure activities that include, of the 10 hours, 6 hours of watching TV.
Mm.
That's not the way I want to live. I think we have a purpose that we should, leave the world in a better place. Almost that old Boy Scout mantra. And you're not going to do that watching reality TV or sporting events and everything. Again, watching sporting events is fun, but that shouldn't be your own. You've got a institutional knowledge. You've got knowledge and wisdom about life, and God knows the world can help. The world needs help right now. And I really think if we focused on that in retirement, you'd have a much more fulfilling life, and you will help others on the way. And I think that's just really important.
Yeah, no, I think what you say is extremely important. It reminds me of when I actually first got started in the business. I decided that I wanted to work with people in retirement because back then we had to do a lot of cold calling, and cold calling at night sucked. But if I cold called during the day to retirement communities, there were people to talk to that wanted to talk to me. And there's this great retirement community called the Imperial Plaza, and the Imperial Plaza had 4 buildings, but I only talk about 2. There was the A building and the D building, and the A building was where all of the activities were. And if you met somebody in the A building, they could be 85 years old, and you might have thought they were 50 or 60. But you met people in the D building, which was the furthest away from the activities, and they could have been 60, and you would have thought they were 80. And it was all about having something to do to really live out that retirement with some purpose and some activity. So I think that's
Exactly.
a part of what you're saying, John.
It's exactly what I'm saying. You spot on. I instead of authoring the book with Kevin Burwell, I could have probably authored it with you. So no, it's spot on. We want to have. You need to have purpose. It increases the quality of your life and the length of your life. And I think we all know as advisors, we see people retire. They work all their lives, and then they pass away. My grandfather did that, right? He was a factory guy. He worked all his life. He retired at 65. At 66, he was dead. That's the way it used to be. He died in the late 70s. Um, that's not retirement now. Retirement could be 30 years, and to spend 30 years after you retire and you're lonely or you're watching TV, that really spurred Kevin and I to write the book and to try to put some purpose and just define what your purpose is, right?
Right.
And it's not our purpose, the financial advisors. It's the purpose of the particular client that's filling out the book.
Yeah, and that 9 hours of sleep and the 6 hours of television time or screen time is probably not a decision. It's just a default. It's
It's
just
a
where
default.
they end up. They didn't say I want to retire so that I can sleep 9 hours a night and spend 6 hours watching TV or on Facebook. That's not what they plan for.
You're exactly right. And so, with a purpose, and we go through, there's 10 missions. First is to write a mission statement, and then it's talk about your families and friends who you want to be around. Maybe it's mending a fence of a broken relationship, right? Hobbies and interests, health and wellness, intellectual activities. There's so many studies that come out. Just doing simple things like crossword puzzles and things like that can keep your mental acuity. Leisure and sports, exploring different cultures, traveling, spiritual health. You and I were talking about that in the pre-interview. Stewardship, and then passing on legacies. And we just did a training session, a workshop for an organization yesterday, and I heard the coolest passing of a legacy story that I'd like to share. It was a Hispanic family, and they had a family recipe, a sangria recipe, and the grandma and grandpa got it made in a wooden plaque, like a charcuterie board, put the recipe on there, and gave one to all of the grandkids and all of the children. And I thought that was such a cool way to pass on that secret family sangria recipe, that everyone would be memorable. They did it at Easter, and I thought it was just a really cool way. But passing on legacies for families is so important, right? Because it keeps you grounded on where you come from, and who you are and where you're going. And those legacies, I don't know if we pass them on like our grandparents or our great grandparents did to us, if we're that good at it. So this sort of outlines that and helps people do that in the book.
Yeah, I love that. And to me, that's a great example of how an advisor can be that cheerleader for that client. And so when they're coming in for that review meeting, it's not the same old boring, you're at this number on your plan, your investments is returned X, Y, Z. It's like, how's life? What are you working on? And continuing to say, what's important for you? What are you doing as it relates to that mission statement that you wrote? And because you wrote that mission statement, what are some of the things that you're working on? In fact, it sounds a little bit like the coaching work that I do, John. I ask my advisors, what's your big dream? What are you trying to accomplish? And then we boil it down to, what are we going to work on right now? And that makes their business more fun than just thinking about the numbers parts of the business. So the same is probably true. I'm sure it's true
It's
for
exactly true. It's spot on. And when you start having those conversations, the 80 Sorelli says that 87% of all clients want trust in their advisor. Well, when they're sharing with you those traditions, and you're sharing your traditions with them in just casual conversation like we're talking today, it builds a connective tissue that is really tough to break. So if you're looking to, competitor proof your book, this is a way to do it. If you're looking to get, those clients that become advocates for you and are going to refer you, what a great way of doing it, by digging deeper and finding the true purpose of where they want to go. And, what's another interesting thing as we've done this, Rob, is we'll find out when we give a book to both a husband and wife, they have different answers, and they've been married together for 40 years, and they haven't talked about what they want to do. Mrs. McGillicuddy wants to travel, and Mr. McGillicuddy wants nothing to do with that. He wants to golf more. And, they have these open dialogues, and it's like, here you got a pile of money. How are you going to spend it so you're both fulfilled? And, those are the conversations that make you truly a professional in the industry, because you're dealing with matters of the heart and head and not just dollars and cents.
Yeah. And if you're the advisor in there guiding, coaching that client along, you're helping them discover those things because of the way that you're asking questions and putting forth, maybe using the language of your book, these missions that they can think about. So let's dig into a couple of those missions. I imagine that you've just told a great story about the charcuterie board, but are there a couple of them like that are your favorites? Like if you had to rewrite the book and they said, well, John, you can only have 4, you can't have 10.
Yeah.
What would they be?
There wasn't a comment a client made to me that was just sort of reframed everything in the way, as an advisor, I looked at things. He goes, do you remember, John, when you were on a merry-go-round when you were a kid, and and you had someone pushing it, was just going around and around and around, and how much fun that was? And I go, yeah, of course, I think everyone's had that experience. He says, did anyone ever grab that merry-go-round and it stops suddenly and you get jarred? I go, yeah. He goes, that's what retirement is. He goes, we're so focused on running and running and running that all of a sudden when we stop, it's jarring and we don't know what to do. We don't know if we should hang on, jump off, laugh, right? We don't know what to do. It's just a sudden stop. And I really thought that this is why you should maybe start your mission statement 5 years ahead of when you're going to retire. So I'm an outdoorsman. So if I want to spend more time outdoors, do I secure that hunting property? Do I start planning out hunting trips or fishing trips or whatever it is, hiking trips? Do I start doing that? Am I going to hit all the national parks? And then how are we going to do that? And when do I incorporate my wife in those conversations and those things? I think it's real important that mission statement of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and when we're going to do it. Because, we've got some natural barriers, right? We're getting older. The knee's going to start hurting. We do more travel in the beginning of our retirement. So do we stack that earlier? And those type of conversations. There are certain places in the world. I've been very blessed to travel all around the world. One of my things I wanted to do ever since 7th grade, and I'm 61, so I've had this dream for a long time, is hit all 7 continents. So my wife and I are going to hit Antarctica in December here, so I can get all that done. But we had a plan for that 2-3 years in advance. And I know most people don't give a rat's tail. I'm going to Antarctica. It's important to me. If my financial advisor was looking at that, he's got to understand how important that was for me, that I've been carrying this since the 7th grade essay. And then how much is going to cost? How do you plan for it? Right. So this dovetails in perfectly what we're doing of getting people to talk about their goals, their wants. And that's nothing new. It's just going that extra deep, that extra thing, and then putting it in. And I'm sort of lazy. I let the client write all this down. I'm not writing it down for them. So in the back of the book, there's little questions, and there's a place to fill in the book. The book's only in 25 pages or so, and you can write in what after each section what you want to do, and then compare notes with your wife, and then start formulating a plan on how you want to tackle this. So there's some very unique things that have come about because of it. But I love the merry-go-round analogy or metaphor, because I think it really sort of talked about a lot of people are going through, but they don't speak about it.
Yeah, because we are all running so fast, even if we think we aren't. I know I was with my wife this weekend. Fortunately, she is also a big Cleveland baseball fan, as am I. So she had never been to PNC Park in Pittsburgh, and so we decided to run up there and see a couple of games. And as we
That's
were
a
together,
great park, by the way.
Oh yeah, no, it's gorgeous. Almost as nice as the one in Cleveland.
Hey, it's your podcast. You can say that all you
want. But I bring that up because one of the things that we realized is that we have been spending a lot of time taking care of our 3 grandchildren, all under the age of 3. And we've been running really hard doing that. And we just hadn't slowed down recently to say, we just need some time together, even if it's in a baseball stadium, filled full of people, but just doing something that we liked doing together. And then I was also thinking about your example of going to Antarctica. I can see, the financial advisor who is trying to kind of steer someone to live retirement the way that they want their client to live retirement. Say, well, John, Antarctica sounds great, but you really won't like it. Wouldn't you enjoy 5 4-day weekends, as opposed to the one that says, what is it you really want to do? And then figuring out that, hey, that is something that your wife wants to do too, and saying, okay, let me help you plan for that. Let me help you understand that that is something that you can afford to do, and do it however you want, because you've created that successful financial retirement that enables you to do the big trip like that.
Yeah, it's spot on. A lot of things that clients want to do recreationally don't make a lot of financial sense. But the thing is they've worked 40 years. A lot of times advisors, especially the G2, they think it's their money they're managing and not the clients. And we've got to really take a step back and know the client's needs, and then their wants, and then their desires, and see if you can fund those properly with the overall objection of taking care of them financially. But can you do that? And you know, I think it's important for the quality of your life, right? And it makes a statement. I've got my kids will be 30 and 28 this year. What am I telling them by taking a trip to Alaska, or excuse me, Antarctica? It's about experiencing the world, right? And traveling and passion. That's a legacy. It's part of my legacy. I want to go. They're going to say, hey, that crazy dad of mine, he went on 7 continents and he's been in 60 countries and he traveled the world. Because he enjoyed meeting people and different cultures and all of the great things. But what a legacy that tells them. And my kids are pretty well traveled, but they're now starting to think 5 years out of where they want to do. My son is an ex Division I athlete, and he wants to go run with the Bulls. So he's planning 2 years from now to go run with the Bulls. That takes money and time. And knowing that as a financial advisor, it's sort of the cheat code for you to become an outstanding advisor, because you're listening.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. And we've talked about fun things, exciting things, running with the Bulls, going to Antarctica, watching Cleveland baseball. But I'm also thinking, next month I've been invited to the graduating ceremony for the Baber Leadership Institute at a community college outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, a couple hours from here. And I mention that because that institute is a result of when I was a financial advisor. I mean, I sold my practice in 2009, so it's been a couple of years. But when I was working with the Babers, who that is named after, they talked about what they wanted to have happen with some of their wealth because they didn't have kids. And unfortunately, the husband, Charlie, one of the greatest guys in the world, passed away several years ago. But his wife, Bev, knew exactly what to do with some of that money that they had accumulated for retirement. And she is fulfilling that legacy, even though she's doing it on her own. And it probably wouldn't be something that, if she hadn't been married to Charlie, she would have thought of. And I think that's just an amazing thing. And to be invited back to be a part of that, and knowing that part of that came about because of the things that we talked about.
Well, just look
And
at, you're
working on
talking
their,
about it. You're talking about it on your podcast. You're furthering that legacy, right?
yeah,
I'm going to go and look. I'm going to go look that gentleman up to find out about him, right? You're furthering that legacy, and that's what it's about. Without you taking time to share that story, and that's what it's about. It's not about standard deviation, alpha, beta. All that stuff's important. But carrying on the legacy, I mean, what a touching story that this widow is carrying on the legacy of her beloved husband, and it's going on and it's going on through you and other people.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
And she calls me, goes, would you mind helping out with this? I was like, would I
What an
mind?
honor. Yeah, what an
It's
honor.
an honor. What can I
Yeah.
do? It's just an amazing thing. And that, again, speaks to why the work that financial advisors do is so important. So, John, we're getting ready to the point where we need to land the plane. Give me like one last nugget of if you're an advisor, if an advisor is listening to this saying, I get that, but I don't know how to turn that switch to go from the standard deviation guy to the purpose guy or gal. How would you kind of suggest they begin to turn the boat?
Two things. One, I would say I would use the comment like this. I would state, Rob, I was just thinking about you today, and I'm going to be sending you a book in the mail. I've appreciated our relationship, and I want you to think about retirement a different way, and I want you to think about your retirement, and then we'll have a conversation. So I'm going to send you a book. Number two, on every review, I did a review yesterday with a client. I gave this lady a book, and she goes, I didn't realize you wrote a book. And I said, it's not for my vanity. There's some great content in here for you to develop, because you're thinking about your 13 grandkids, and now you're having great grandkids, and you're trying to define what you're going to leave and where you're going to leave it, who you're going to leave it with, and why. This will help you sort of go through it in a very elementary process, but for you and your husband to talk about it. And she was very thankful, and she hugged me for it. So on the reviews, and then also take 5 people, your top 5 clients, and say, I was thinking about you, and I was going to send you a gift. Those 2 ways are a great way to open up dialogue.
Yeah, those are great. And because of the way that you said that, you're saying, hey, to the advisor, here's a tool that you can use if you might have a hard time just kind of coming up with the language on your own. Because sometimes we just need that little tool, that little thing that helps point us in the right direction. So I love that. So John, as we end here, what's the best way for advisors listening to this podcast to connect with you and to get their copy of, or copies of, Mission Retirement?
Yeah, well, thank you, Rob. This is a picture of the book. We can, if you order it in bulk, you can write the foreword. The advisor can write the foreword, and then can also have it done in his color scheme for his firm. So it's a great white label type branding. But you can contact us at Catalyst4Growth. It's the number 4, so Catalyst4Growth.org. And if you want a single copy, you can get it on Amazon. You can search by Kailunas or Mission Retirement or Burwell. But if you want to buy it in bulk, that's what most advisors are doing it, and they're customizing it. We'll walk you through it. And then we'll also, I think what's really important, we'll give you a launch plan that'll help you how to implement it. So those 2 ideas I gave you, we actually got 19 of them. We'll talk you through and help you through those so you can, penetrate your book properly with this type of concept.
John, I love it. As I told you before we got started, one of the goals of this podcast is to share inspiration, but also to share actionable ideas. And I think you have just given the audience whether they're already doing some of this or not, some inspiration. Because for some advisors, just go buy a copy of the book and play with the 10 missions. But if you're like, I've been looking for a way to really, turn the page, this is a great way to do. So John, thank you for that. Thank you for being a guest on the Purpose Focused Advisor. For our audience, as always, thank you for listening. And remember, we are rooting for your success. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Purpose Focused Advisor. If today's episode gave you something to think about or a step you're ready to take, head over to truestfancoaching.com. There you'll find tools, resources, and ways we can work together to help you lead with purpose and build the business and life you were meant for. If you enjoyed the show, we'd be grateful if you take a moment to rate and review it. It helps more advisors find their way here.